If you think some of the most powerful Confederate generals were geniuses, this video is going to hurt your feelings. What's up, history homies? Today, we're taking a look at Confederate generals who got way more credit than they deserved. Whether you're a Civil War junkie or you're just here for the drama, by the end of this video, you'll see exactly why these 5 generals could be considered massively overrated. And stick around because I want to know if you agree with me, if you think I'm dead wrong, or perhaps you just think I'm some bum cosplaying as a colonial who has no idea what the he's talking about. And before we dive in, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future videos, polls, and bracket challenges. Alright, now let's kick things off with the first overrated Confederate general. First up, we got A.P. Hill. This guy started the war looking like he might be one of the Confederacy's next big stars. At the first Battle of Bull Run, he rushed to reinforce the Confederates, but ended up not seeing much action. But hey, the ambition was there. A for effort. And by early 1862, he was a brigadier general and had already proved his grit at Williamsburg. He was promoted to major general and handed command of the light division, which, spoiler alert, wasn't light at all. But it was, however, quite famous. These guys moved fast, fought hard, and marched ridiculous distances. They held firm in the 7 days battles, crushed it at Second Bull Run, and at Antietam, after a brutal 17-mile march, smashed Burnside's flank just in time to save Lee's army. Early Hill, brave, fast, and full of fight. But he peaked. Courage was never the problem. The man had plenty of that. But unfortunately, courage does not pay the bills, and it definitely doesn't win campaigns when your planning and coordination fall apart. After Stonewall Jackson's death in 1863, Lee gave Hill command of the 3rd Corps, a huge promotion with huge responsibilities. Unfortunately, this is where things went, well, south. No pun intended. Once he was on his own, Hill's timing was off. His orders were vague and his coordination really shaky at best. It's like he got called up to the big leagues and struck out hard. That same energy and aggression that made him dangerous under Jackson now worked against him. And when Gettysburg kicked off, Hill's corps was right in the thick of it, and not in a good way. His division under Henry Heth fired the first shots of the battle, kicking off what became the biggest battle of the war. The problem? Lee hadn't planned to fight there yet. Hill basically stumbled into a full-scale engagement before the army was ready, setting 3 days of chaos into motion. Day 2 didn't go any better. His trusted commander William Dorsey Pender was seriously wounded, leaving coordination in shambles. And Day 3, Pickett's charge? Ah yes, Pickett's charge. 2/3 of those poor, doomed men came from Hill's corps. They took the heaviest casualties. Then came Bristow Station, where Hill got chewed up by a smaller Union force. And the Overland Campaign? His corps was disorganized. Spotsylvania? Illness. Cold Harbor? A partial collapse. By Petersburg, Hill was so sick he could barely command. The pattern was blatantly obvious. Hill had become a liability. Time and time again, he charged first and thought later, and it cost Lee dearly. By 1864, the Confederacy didn't need reckless bravery. It needed calm leadership and coordination. His repeated missteps, poor timing, and erratic health chipped away at Lee's army and his own legacy. But after the war, A.P. Hill became a legend, the fearless leader of the Light Division, Lee's energetic and supposedly brilliant corps commander. Monuments, memoirs, and lost cause storytelling turned him into the poster child of Confederate heroism. Always at the front and always decisive. The truth, Hill was brave, sure, and sometimes tactically sharp, but as an independent corps commander, I'm not buying it. Misjudgments, poor coordination, and overexposed divisions were a recurring problem. Gettysburg, Bristow Station, and the Overland Campaign show that courage alone couldn't make up for a flawed strategy and inconsistent leadership. Hero in memory? Okay. Strategically reliable? Not even close. Next up, we have J.E.B. Stuart, the Confederacy's golden boy of the cavalry. He allowed Robert E. Lee to strike with speed and style. Early in the war, he made his mark at the first Battle of Bull Run, chasing Union forces and earning a reputation for awesome cavalry moves. Promoted to Major General in Northern Virginia, Stuart led raids that embarrassed the North and inspired Southern morale. Things were really going his way. And at Chancellorsville, he stepped in as a temporary infantry corps commander after Stonewall Jackson was wounded, brilliantly coordinating attacks and artillery despite being a cavalryman by trade. Early Jeb? Bold, flashy, and seemingly unstoppable, and beloved by his men and feared by his enemies. But glory has its limits, and his greatest strength often became his biggest weakness. His love of raids and headline-grabbing stunts sometimes left Lee completely in the dark. During the Gettysburg campaign, he set out to screen the Army's flank and raid Union territory, but he took so long that Lee was blind to the enemy movements when the battle began. That was a huge problem. Instead of providing crucial intelligence, Stuart was off capturing supply wagons and making a spectacle. And by the time he arrived on July 2nd, the battle was already in full swing. Failing to link up with Ewell's corps left Lee guessing, a giant blunder. And earlier at Brandy Station, his surprise raid was actually outdone by Pleasanton's, proving that Union cavalry had caught up to his skill. Even his flashy Chambersburg raid, while impressive on paper, achieved little beyond exhausting his men and his horses. By the Overland campaign, Stuart was still brave and tactically sharp in bursts, but his judgment was in question. The problem wasn't his courage. He had plenty of that. It was overconfidence, a craving for glory, and a tendency to prioritize audacity over the Army's practical needs. The boldness that made him a legend was actually making him a liability. Stuart's missteps rippled throughout the Army of Northern Virginia. His flamboyance, I'm talking ostrich-plumed hats, red-line capes, and daring raids occasionally undermined operational effectiveness. But after the war, Jeb became legendary. Everybody celebrated his flair, bravery, and charm. But Gettysburg and other campaigns reveal a man whose love for flashiness sometimes trumped prudence. His courage, charisma, and showmanship endure in memory, but his failures in judgment remind us that even heroes have limits. Next up, we have Joseph E. Johnston, the poster child for caution in the Confederate Army. A West Point engineer, Mexican-American war veteran, and lifelong soldier, he brought brains, experience, and steady nerves to every battlefield. His careful planning and ability to maintain morale made him seem like the calm hand the Confederacy desperately needed. Even at the First Battle of Bull Run, he worked behind the scenes, rallying troops and ensuring the South's victory didn't crumble. Look, Johnston was impressive early in the war, but there's a catch. His caution sometimes became a liability. He wasn't slow because he lacked skill. He just hated unnecessary risk. Retreats became his default tactic. He had Jefferson Davis scratching his head, like, bro, what are you doing? Davis quickly grew frustrated with his hesitation, and Johnston's reputation shifted from brilliant tactician to overly cautious commander. Sure, being careful can prevent disaster, but when caution lets the enemy advance unchallenged, it becomes a weakness. Not exactly a good strategy if you want to win a civil war. The Confederacy needed bold action to offset the North's advantage, but Johnston rarely delivered it. Take the Peninsula Campaign. Facing McClellan's enormous army, Johnston's defensive skills were solid, but his constant withdrawals gave up vast territory without striking a decisive blow. And at Seven Pines, his intricate attack plan failed to fully succeed, and a serious wound forced Robert E. Lee to assume command. And over in the Western Theater, Johnston's defensive maneuvers against Sherman in 1864 slowed the Union advance but allowed Sherman to maintain the initiative, inching steadily to Atlanta. They say defense wins championships, but it definitely does not win the Civil War. Johnston's cautious approach protected his forces, but ceded momentum to the Union time and time again. By repeatedly yielding ground instead of engaging decisively, he let the Union grab the South by the balls. But after the war, Johnston earned praise for prudence, even from Union generals like Grant and Sherman, and he is remembered as a careful, intelligent commander. Monuments, memoirs, and stories celebrated his ability to preserve his army against overwhelming odds. But what was the truth? I think it was Johnston's caution kept his forces alive, but often prevented them from achieving meaningful victories. What if he had been just a little bit more aggressive? Maybe the outcome would have been different here and there. In the end, he was a master of survival, but not decisive action. Next up, we've got the fan favorite, and this might ruffle some feathers, Thomas Stonewall Jackson. Look, I'll admit, Jackson's early reputation was forged in steadfastness and audacious leadership. Just look at what he did in the 1862 Shenandoah Valley Campaign. Over 48 days, he marched 17,000 men more than 640 miles, defeating multiple Union forces and keeping tens of thousands of enemy troops away from Richmond. He had a knack for moving swiftly and exploiting terrain. Jackson's early campaigns demonstrated precise coordination, daring maneuvers, and uncanny timing, and he quickly became one of the Confederacy's most celebrated tactical commanders, second only to Robert E. Lee. So you might be thinking, Major History, you have no idea what you're talking about. This guy's not overrated. Wait, hear me out. Brilliance does have its limits though, and Jackson's strengths often created hidden liabilities. By all accounts, his command style was rigid, secretive, and occasionally reckless. He famously kept plans close to the chest, leaving subordinates and fellow generals confused. At Chancellorsville, splitting his forces against a larger Union army worked, but really because enemy mistakes fell right into his hands. Like, for all of his achievements, he was also one lucky son of a bitch. And some of his quirks, like praying mid-battle and ignoring medical advice, they added to the legend but sometimes hindered operational effectiveness. And his record kind of blends genius with inconsistency. During the Peninsula Campaign, he arrived late at Mechanicsville and positioned troops too close to ongoing fighting, missing key opportunities. At Malvern Hill, his piecemeal assaults resulted in heavy casualties. Even his celebrated Valley Campaign began with a defeat at Kernstown due to faulty intelligence, though he did rebound. Jackson's secretive, rigid style occasionally led to tragic mishaps, culminating in his accidental shooting by Confederate pickets at Chancellorsville. Jackson's risky tactics shaped Confederate fortunes but carried hidden costs. His rapid maneuvers inspired morale and won dramatic victories, yet coordination with other commanders was often strained. And we can't gloss over his death. I just don't think he was in the game long enough, which is why I think he is more legend, not resume, and a lot of that having to do with his badass nickname. His legend is cemented in American history, fueled by early triumphs and the drama of his death. But his missteps during the Peninsula Campaign and 7 Days battles show that he was far from infallible. Sure, Chancellorsville immortalized him, yet it also revealed the risks of his stubborn secrecy and impulsiveness, ultimately leading to his death by friendly fire. Iconic and legendary? Absolutely. Perfect and flawless? Far from it. And if that one pissed you off, you're gonna love this next one. Of course, it's none other than Robert E. Lee. This guy was admired for his discipline, charisma, and the fierce loyalty he inspired in his men. Early in the war, his leadership transformed the Army of Northern Virginia into the Confederacy's most formidable fighting force. His early successes, from the 7 Days battles to the Second Bull Run, Fredericksburg, and Chancellorsville, demonstrated an extraordinary ability to maneuver, exploit enemy mistakes, and win tactical engagements even when outnumbered. Lee's personal courage, attention to morale, and professionalism inspired hope across the South. His defensive strategies had kept Richmond safe, disrupted Union advances, and made him seem nearly mythic in skill. Early Robert E. Lee was seemingly unstoppable, but I'm here to make the case that he may have been more of an infallible general than you thought, with patterns of overreach, risky decisions, and sometimes reckless offense. I mean, his invasions of the North, culminating in Gettysburg, stretched his forces thin and exposed them to massive casualties. Lee seemingly prioritized immediate battlefield gains over long-term Confederate survival. Even after his victory at Chancellorsville, the strategic payoff was limited. Lee frequently pushed the limits of his army's endurance, often disregarding logistics and the South's inability to replace losses. The myth of Lee as a flawless genius really simplifies a record that mixes tactical brilliance with hubris and strategic overextension. The truth is, his campaigns produced some of the Civil War's most celebrated victories, but also some of its heaviest losses. At Antietam, his invasion of Maryland ended indecisively, resulting in staggering casualties and enabling Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. Not exactly what Jefferson Davis had hoped for. And at Chancellorsville, it showed Lee's creativity, but it came at the cost of Stonewall Jackson's life. And Gettysburg was the height of Lee's overreach, with Pickett's charge causing enormous losses with very minimal strategic gain. And in the Overland Campaign, including Wilderness, Spotsylvania, Cold Harbor, and the Siege of Petersburg, Lee showed the limits of aggressive tactics against a resource-rich Union. His battlefield skill could not overcome the Confederacy's weakness or even his own ambitious offensive mindset. Lee's focus on aggressive tactics over cautious defense demonstrates how reputation can sometimes outshine strategic reality. After the war, Lee became a godlike figure in Southern memory. He is considered noble, honorable, and tactically flawless. Memoirs, monuments, and cultural memory amplify his legend. But in reality, Lee combined tactical brilliance with miscalculations and costly overextensions. Respecting Lee as a military leader requires separating myth from reality. There is no denying that he was an extraordinary tactician, but his genius often carried high human costs. His victories dazzled, but his overreach leaves a mixed legacy. If you've made it this far into the video, I just want to say thank you. You're a true history homie. Do you think that these Confederate generals are overrated? Maybe you think they're underrated, or perhaps you have your own list of overrated Confederate generals. Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you get a second, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you next time. Get out of here.